Hi there.
Hello, Terry.
How you doing?
Um, yeah, I'm hanging in there. I been offline for a while. My dad got COVID
Oh no.
uh and got really sick and then looked like he might be getting better and then went downhill. So he passed away a couple weeks ago.
I'm very sorry.
Yeah, it's frustrating, because um didn't want to get a vaccine, didn't wear masks, had numerous high risk health issues. It was just frustrating. So we had a very complicated relationship, but I took my you guys, hang on a second. Sorry, the dogs are being annoying as usual. Uh or was I? Oh, I took our little RV down, and it's California, which is like 3 times the size of the UK. It's it basically turned into a long road trip where I had lots of sort of just quiet driving time. And then when I got back, then I was helping his wife with logistics, and they neither of them were very technical, and they had these ancient iPhone SEs with lots of pictures that had never been backed up. So I was trying to figure out how to get the pictures offline, and anyway, uh, and then when I got home, I decided that um, my path to emotional well-being should be through hard labor. I wanted to do something productive, so I hauled about, I don't know, 3,000 pounds worth of rocks from my backyard and landscaped and built new veggie boxes with my daughter, and then my body was like, "You're in your 50s." So now I'm in pain. Anyway, it's a process. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, as you can probably see, I had an interaction with a cat recently.
I see you got a little the cat won.
He was very sweet. He was sitting on my chest and he just delicately reached out to pat me on the nose and went,
Oh man. I noticed, so I would, try to wear gloves as much as possible, but if, I don't like wearing gloves around the chop saw, um, for obvious reasons. And then I would forget to put them back on, and then I would like get a little nick. And I've noticed they take a lot longer to heal than they used to, and they happen much, much more readily than they used to. So my hands are all ripped to pieces. Yeah, this whole getting older thing, I'm not a fan.
"Shush, I'm pretending I'm not old."
Yeah, there you go. So I saw there was oops, hang on a second. Oh, I GitHub logged me out, so I'm trying to get back in here. So I saw there was further discussion about the mainframe document. Did a document actually get started? I didn't read the whole thing yet.
So there is a document, uh, but at the
Okay.
moment it's a very general discussion about sort of DevOps and processes in general. So it's not currently feeding into what we would need to put something on the site. Uh, but I think it's a good place to start the conversation. And what really needs to happen is that it needs to identify, what are the exceptions that are special for the main
Great. Yeah.
scenario, and where what differences do there need to be for that particular application. And I
Okay.
don't think it's that much actually. There are some physical constraints, and probably it's more of a challenge in the tooling space, simply because a lot of the standard tools won't uh, account for the fact that you need to be doing your compilation on a different platform.
Right. Right. And it's funny. I don't know if I was telling you this or Fatih. I'm now at a company that does builds for mainframes. And I was like, and I had no idea it was still a thing that people were still. And then I was like, of course it is, right? I mean, like the whole COVID thing, at least in the US, that's when everybody realized that not only are government agencies using mainframes for critical services, they're still using like 40-year-old COBOL code.
Yeah.
It's just like,
yeah. We invested heavily in this technology in 1985. You don't expect us to pay more.
why on earth would we change that? Oh man. All right. Am I actually editing here? No. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Sorry. It was just while we were talking, I was trying to get the agenda doc up.
Yeah, I can see your content. You're in
Yeah,
the wrong day though.
I'm in the wrong place.
That was 2 weeks ago.
That
Nobody should do that.
yeah, that was apologies. I meant to drop a note to say in the channel, and I was in the midst of all of my family chaos. Okay. So, all right. I just want to make sure we're capturing. Oops. Mail. How are things with you in your new house? Is everything all settled? Are you going to be there for a while, or is this temporary while you think of what your next moves are?
Just going through lots and lots of bureaucracy at the moment. There's a ton of paperwork still to be sorted out.
To do what? To modify the house or to establish residency?
To establish residency, yeah.
Okay, so you're planning on staying. Okay, cool. And where are you again? Not too far from where you were, just not on an island anymore?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right, now where is, let's see, Google Doc, Google Doc. John Murtek. Oh, do you have, I don't see a link to the doc. Do you have to happen to have it handy?
Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, wait, here it is. Here it is.
Got it?
Found it. Yeah. Okay, continuous delivery for mainframes. Okay. New mainframe. There we are.
I mean, it seems like an ideal application for CD events, because that's pretty much the case that's trying to solve, which is allowing you to integrate arbitrary systems and processes into an overarching continuous delivery flow.
Yep. We always have such good sound bites. Sorry, you were saying the challenge.
Yeah, the challenge is going to be, what does the vendor space look like there? What constraints are there on actually being able to compile things in in that domain, and I'm assuming that it's a fairly closed shop, in which case it would be a matter of persuading the vendors to include the CD events APIs, and then allow external systems to invoke those to trigger the build process.
Yeah, I dropped a note in there as kind of a reminder for myself, because if I type it or write it, helps me remember better. But I'm thinking, like, as the principal mainframe vendor, I have recently become aware, as we are producing software that one could run on them. IBM in our interactions comes across as really wanting to prove the legitimacy of the platform on a routine basis. Like they and what I mean by that is they've got this whole thing, for example, for OEMing software and what the requirements are for having your software be part of their OEM ecosystem, which has got some pretty like well considered and aggressively aggressive requirements that they're trying to drive around, like secure software supply chain. Like they talk a lot about the sorts of things that that we would consider a best practice, or at least in the vein of that. I should see if that document that I was looking at is actually a public document, because if it is, I'll share it with you, because it was kind of interesting. I was surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe they pulled some red hat people over. I don't know. Okay.
Well, I mean, you've got to think that most of the use cases for that equipment is in high compliance environment. So
It's a very good point. Yes. Is that might be an excellent thing to reference in this document. All right, I'll have to, I now have it up, so I'll take a peek, and one of us can.
It's probably also worth thinking about the bigger picture, because typically the mainframe doesn't sit in isolation. If you're developing an application, then the mainframe is just one component of that. So your UI stuff is typically sitting on other platforms. So you may have several technology layers before you get down to the mainframe component of the solution. So looking at this from an IP management, asset management aspect, you really want a continuous delivery process that can integrate across multiple platforms, but tie it all into one coherent release process.
I actually had a speaking of my world and IBM, well, not speaking of IBM, but speaking of my world, which talking about IBM made me think about. I actually did have a sit down and think about, like, would we want to bring Evergreen CI into the CDF? And I realized it will never pass. It will never pass requirements. I have no way of building a legit community around it. It is so specialized for what it's good for. It really is not a generic solution at all, and there would be no reason to make it so. So I was like, oh well, it was worth a thought. But I did finally kind of sit down and go through, like, reviewing how we've approached some of the different project onboardings, and I'm like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Oh. I think we're in that awkward time at the moment where we can see that there's a desperate need for more overarching end-to-end systems, but the investment and the effort is all sitting, down in narrow niches, and so
Yes.
it's very hard to get enough work going on at a more generic level, getting people to agree to collaborate and span different domains.
Or this is not a full-fledged thought, it's just been kind of tickling in the back of my head as we've been talking. Like, so one of the things that we've been doing is a lot of instrumentation work using open telemetry framework, right? Into Evergreen. And then that was kind of the proof of concept. And for Evergreen itself, it's like, oh, okay, well, here's this, distributed systems tooling that manages an amazing amount of volume, and we're already starting to see some lightweight benefits on having this type of instrumentation. But what we really want to do is get to the point where we have a standard for how our product teams are developing, are instrumenting the tests themselves, right? So then we can see through the open telemetry spans, okay, well, here the Evergreen task kicked off and it did a bunch of stuff. And oh, look, that one waited far longer than it should have for that particular resource, whatever, we'll look at that. But then now you can follow it all the way down into the sub-processes, which are the actual build test execution. And we're figuring out a way to be able to say, okay, query Evergreen metadata, because there's an agent on each resource that gets spun up that will tell you what the context, the trace context is, so you can pass it through your tests, even if the tests themselves are subsequently distributed to other resources. So we get this, it follows it to whatever piece of EC2 container, whatever, so that we can build that breadth of view. And so I've been telling my team, it's like, what the value here is not that we're going to be adding significant feature development to any of our tools to do this. It's that by doing this, we can now bring other tools that have, bought into the open telemetry idea and are using it, and we can just throw those tools at it, right? And so when I'm thinking about, secure software supply chain concepts like that, it's like, what's the threshold of context, like an OTel trace object or a CD event, or, right, like, what are those anchor points that with a sufficient number of those, it's not about an individual project implementation, it's about like integration best practices, or what I mean. I'm struggling with this idea to articulate it, but it kind of makes sense where I'm going with that. It's like, do we have enough, or what's the missing thing, right? Is it like CD events is coming along, OTel is there, testing, I mean, that's really kind of a framework thing rather than anything you can anchor on, like, oh, if you're Java, your JUnit, or if you're Python, your PyTest, whatever. But but maybe if there's one more thing that we could get those projects to pull into their frameworks, that opens up, this wealth of amazing possibility that then consumers of those frameworks just get for free.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a huge thing, it's a small thing. Right.
Yeah. And I think the thing that seems fundamentally broken everywhere at the moment is the end-to-end piece. It's the idea that, okay, you start a new project, how do you get a technology stack and a delivery process which is best practices compliant, but which works in an opinionated way out of the box. So you don't need to already have a complete team of experts who are all in agreement over how this stuff should work. You just click a button and you get a default setup, and then you just extend that to make it do what you need. And this has really been brought home to me recently, because obviously over the past few years I've been happily playing in the the Jenkins X, the Kubernetes space, and got used to what you can achieve when you're at that level of granularity. But recently I've gone back to looking at, what's the default offering from one of the major cloud vendors? What's the entry level distributed services solution that the average customer is going to default to if they come to a major cloud vendor? And it doesn't work. It's broken. I've been using this stuff for a few weeks now, and there are just absolutely gaping issues. Like, the system provides quick start for setting up new projects, but what they actually generate is code that is 2 to 3 years out of date, stuff full of deprecated libraries and thousands of CVEs. And if you set one up and try and run it, won't execute. So you actually have to do software archaeology on the quick start to work out how you're supposed to use the platform now. And that always strikes me as being a really bad sign. If the only people who can use your platform are people who are already fluent experts, then you've really got a problem, because you can't expand your market any further.
Oh my God. So, I haven't tried the AWS solutions, but I've heard it sounds like it's pretty much the same thing, what you're saying, on all three of the big cloud platforms. They're really not interested in selling that level of solution. They just want to sell compute resources or storage, right? And I can't even tell you the number of times I had it out, but to have these really intense conversations of like, you can't compare cloud build, for example, with Jenkins or any other solution, because yes, if you set it up if you do all the work to set it up, it can be a very highly efficient way of especially if you're using containers, a highly efficient way of spinning up a whole bunch of resources to do a bunch of stuff and then spin it back down for you, right? But that's exactly your point. The customer would have to do all of the work to figure out what those tasks are. Nothing comes for free. The only thing that you would get for free, which was good, but it was only the one piece, is that if what you produced was a container and you put it into our artifact registry, we'd automatically scan it for you. Well, how nice of us, right? Like, really? That's it? Yeah, and I found it, and people were so disparaging of Jenkins as being a 20-year-old tool. I'm like, yeah, what? People have already done the work. Like, the Jenkins plugin ecosystem is both the most awesome and the most wretched place on earth. Awesome because everybody has figured out something, and wretched because it's not being maintained and it's a disaster. Yeah. Right. But that's, you are so right. It's not worth, nobody has figured out how to make it worth the business investment to actually solve that problem for real. And I completely agree. And this is why I came back to, well, is there a middle ground? Right. And the Jenkins plugin ecosystem is a bunch of it's at the level of granularity where it's easier, right? It's like, oh, I need to be able to hook up these two things, and I want to be able to see, a nice little UI element when it's done, and here are the goofy icons that I'm going to add, have it produce. Okay, so if you do that one thing, Chuck Norris will come up and give you a thumbs up, and you move on to the next thing, right? But that's too low a level of granularity, right? That's why it never got past the plugin ecosystem. So what's the middle ground, right? And that's when I came to the whole, well, can it be around some of these standards that enable behaviors? Like, everybody use CD events, everybody use OTel trace events, everybody use blah, 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 blah. Because then, instead of having like the box of Legos, that's just the box of Legos, maybe then we have like the kits, right? So the level of customization is more truly building block. Like, oh, I need to be able to do this type of thing. All right, there's a tool, and all I have to do is put this trace ID or whatever, and all of a sudden I can do these types of things, right? But yeah, I don't know how to articulate that very well. How are things going in CD events? Is there like, are you still lurking around in there and doing things?
I haven't caught up with them for a while, so I must go and have a look and see where we've got to.
Yeah, I was talking about that idea, and I sent a bunch of my engineers off to read the specs. But they're not quite in the headspace, I think. A lot of my engineers have never worked anywhere other than MongoDB. So that's a challenge. I'm trying to figure out how to bring in a few more folks who have touched more than one system. Budgets.
Well, if you need a hand with anything, give me a shout.
I will. Yeah, if only we had a bevy of free engineers who were bored to implement some of these use case examples. Oy. All right. I think I have, now that I'm sort of lifting my head back up from catching up for being out for a couple weeks and having all the email and Slack threads I've had to read up on. I think I still have some outstanding PRs. I'll try and get those done by the end of the week. Just clean up. I know the translation stuff had some tweaks that needed unless Fatih took care of it. Is there anything else that's been waiting on me? Again, I apologize for kind of disappearing for a while.
No, I think we're sort of a little bit in limbo at the moment. So
waiting for Broadcom.
yeah, well, what we need to do really is probably sit down and work out what we're going to do later in the year and what we want to try and get achieved, and then you run around and start chasing people up again, because we got so far with that reference architecture, and then that's kind of stalled out because we didn't manage to get any additional contributions in the right spaces. So
Yeah.
that we need to put some energy back into again.
Okay. All right. Well, if you don't mind, I need some coffee. Unless you have another topic you wanted to touch on, then maybe I could use the rest of this. Then I can use the rest of this blocked out time maybe to poke at those PRs a bit before I go into, oh God, 8 hours of solid meetings. Whee.
Surely.
It was lovely to see you, Terry. Good luck with your immigration.
And you take care.
Cheers.